The boardroom on the 28th floor smelled like fresh espresso and expensive cologne. I sat at the long, polished walnut table. My 37-page compliance report open in front of me. Every annotation highlighted in yellow. Every cross-reference bookmarked. My name is David Ellison. For 12 years, I had been the compliance director at Nexlify, the enterprise software company that started in a Palo Alto garage and was now weeks away from going public. Marcus Reed, the new chief compliance officer, leaned back in his leather chair with that easy politician smile. He was 32, handpicked after a short stint on Capitol Hill, with a jaw like a movie star and a wardrobe that screamed future CEO. He waved a hand at my report as if it were yesterday's newspaper. You really want us to pause an IPO rollout over a font mismatch in one footnote? Marcus said, his voice smooth and laced with amusement. Come on, David. This isn't the early 2000s. The market moves fast. Investors reward speed, not paranoia. A ripple of polite laughter spread around the table. The CFO glanced at his phone. The chairman nodded along. Janice from legal, who used to call me at midnight panicking over metadata issues, suddenly found her coffee cup fascinating. I cleared my throat. My voice stayed steady. But inside I felt the first crack. Section 12.2 of our own compliance framework, approved by legal, finance, and external auditors, requires full integrity verification of all disclosed datasets before any public offering. That font mismatch in the Q3 earnings appendix isn't cosmetic. It means the document was edited after the final audit sign-off. That's a material red flag for potential retroactive changes. Marcus raised a hand like he was stopping a child from interrupting Storytime. We've already run it through the new AI-assisted validation suite. Everything checks out. Even if there was a minor edit, it was to fix a typo. Relax, David. We're trying to get this company to the next level. More chuckles. Someone muttered old school thinking. I looked around the room. Not a single pair of eyes met mine. I had trained half these people. I had written the policies that kept Nexlify out of regulatory crosshairs during 3 previous funding rounds. Now I was an obstacle. I closed the folder slowly. The click of the cover sounded louder than it should have. Server 8, I said quietly. If anyone touches it, make sure you understand exactly what you're deleting. Marcus raised an eyebrow. We've already migrated everything to the cloud. We're not living in the Stone Age anymore. I stood up without another word, left the stack of exhibits on the table, and walked out. Down the marble hallway, past the new integrity, innovation, agility wall etching that looked more like corporate wallpaper than conviction. Outside, the Seattle sky had that bruised gray-yellow tint before a heavy rain. I lit a cigarette for the first time in 11 years. My hands shook so badly, I nearly burned my thumb. I didn't go back to my office. I went straight to HR, handed over my badge, and told Melissa, the receptionist, my resignation letter was already on the shared drive. She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. I didn't explain. There was nothing left to explain. That night I sat alone in my small house in Bellevue, the one my ex-wife had left 2 years earlier because she said she was tired of competing with my audit logs. The shame burned hot under my skin, but underneath it there was something colder and steadier. Certainty. Because years earlier, when I was writing the original data architecture in a cramped apartment with a broken air conditioner, I had added one quiet clause in Section 1.2.4.3. Server 8 would house an immutable, air-gapped, time-stamped repository of all compliance-sensitive disclosures. Deletion required explicit 3-party confirmation from legal, audit, and executive leadership. Only 2 entities ever touched it, me and an automated weekly script that ran on a private power cycle. No one else knew where it really lived. I had relabeled the physical room, janitorial overflow, paint supplies 6 years ago. Marcus had never read the full policy. He only saw the sanitized version the board reviewed once a quarter. 2 weeks later, I was in sweatpants at my kitchen table when my phone buzzed. My old friend Ron from accounting sent a screenshot of a Forbes article. Marcus Reed's face filled the screen, holding a laptop like he knew how to code. The headline screaming, "Youngest compliance chief disrupts governance before 30." They quoted my retention protocols almost word for word, calling them lean, cloud-native innovation. Marcus had repackaged everything I built as his own breakthrough. The IPO was accelerating. They had shaved months off the timeline thanks to streamlined risk architecture. I laughed until I choked on my coffee. Every safeguard I had written, every buried tripwire wrapped in dry procedural language, was now being sold as revolutionary Gen Z thinking. Investors were pouring in. Analysts called Nexlify the next big enterprise unicorn. I opened my private backup drive and scrolled to the folder labeled server_8_archive. The executable sat there, dormant. It didn't destroy records. It didn't leak data. It simply recorded every access, every query, every shutdown in an unalterable chain. It waited for the day someone would need proof. I had built it that way on purpose. Not for revenge. For survival. Corporate arrogance is predictable. I had seen too many companies eat 9-figure fines because someone thought they could delete inconvenient history. So, I made the system idiot-proof. Slow to trigger. Easy to miss. But absolute once violated. Marcus thought he was cleaning house when he ordered interns to wipe ancient junk servers in an off-site Franklin storage unit. He bragged about it in the break room, laughing about dusty cables and Fallout-era hardware. He had deleted the one system the policy explicitly protected. He had done it without any of the required authorizations. His name was now the only signature on the decommissioning log. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt the weight lift. For the first time in over a decade, I slept through the night. The first crack appeared as a polite email from the SEC. Routine pre-IPO inquiry. Anyone who has been in compliance long enough knows routine from the SEC is code for someone is sniffing around. They wanted 5 things. The last item was the quiet gunshot, a full copy of the mandatory immutable disclosure backup as described in the company's own internal policy. Section 1.2.2.4.3. They had found the dusty clause everyone else had skipped. They wanted server 8. And they gave the company 72 hours. Panic rippled through Nexlify. Marcus's team tore through cloud nodes, Google Vault archives, SharePoint sites. Nothing. Because server 8 had never lived in the cloud. It sat air-gapped behind a false utility panel in a climate-controlled room no one but facilities remembered existed. And Marcus had personally ordered it wiped 3 weeks earlier. I watched from my quiet house while Slack leaks and frantic texts reached me through old colleagues. Julian, the young IT engineer I had mentored, texted at midnight. Did we ever actually have a server 8, or was that just a test instance? I replied only, check the policy. The board issued reassuring statements about state-of-the-art infrastructure and full compliance. The irony tasted metallic. Marcus paced his office, sleeves rolled up, barking buzzwords at terrified engineers. The SEC agents arrived on a Tuesday morning. 2 men in plain gray suits. No drama. Just quiet authority. They were shown into the glass conference room at 9:43 a.m. By 10:15 legal had an emergency huddle. By 10:35 the air smelled like fear. Marcus tried to manage it like a podcast interview. Confident gestures. Smooth explanations. The lead investigator asked one simple question. We would like the immutable compliance backup referenced in section 1.2.4.3. Specifically the off-site non-cloud server 8. Marcus froze half a second too long. Then he pivoted. Server 8 has been migrated to our primary cloud node for efficiency. Any records you're looking for are fully retrievable. The investigator didn't blink. We want the original, unaltered copy. The air-gapped one. Marcus laughed nervously. That was his mistake. You don't laugh at federal investigators. You answer. You produce.
Or they stay.
By noon they had sent engineers scrambling again. Nothing. Because the only backup was gone. Wiped without authorization. Violating internal policy and 2 federal standards. Marcus's name was the only one on the deletion certificate. The board was furious. Investors started pulling out. The $1.4 billion valuation bled nearly $500 million in days. Subpoenas followed. The IPO was quietly postponed, pending regulatory review. By the end of the week, the press release was brief and buried. Nexlify postpones IPO amid regulatory review. Translation: the dream was dead. Underwriters withdrew. Lead investors fled. Marcus disappeared from the company website. The official line was, resigned to pursue other opportunities. In reality, the board threw him under the bus, with snow chains. My name started surfacing in whispers. The old compliance guy warned us. An anonymous message from legal. You were right. I didn't reply. I sat in a small cafe that served burn espresso. The same place I used to work weekends when I still believed long hours could protect people from their own ambition. I opened the old leather binder one last time to section 1.2.4.3. The clause I had written while eating instant noodles during a thunderstorm. I didn't feel joy or vengeance. I felt release. They had laughed at caution. They had called procedure paranoia. They had deleted the brakes and called it innovation. I didn't destroy them. I simply walked away and let gravity do what gravity does. The rules were always there. Marcus broke them. Paper remembers. And in the quiet of that cafe, with the bitterness of bad coffee anchoring me, I closed the binder and whispered the final truth to myself. I never deleted anything. I only wrote the rules. He was the one who chose to ignore them. What would you have done if you had built the only parachute and watched the pilot cut the lines before takeoff? Would you have warned them louder? Or would you have stepped off the plane and let the fall teach the lesson? The answer still haunts me on quiet nights.